I took a theater management class in college. One of the things the instructor taught us was that you can never put too much money into marketing and advertisements. As annoying as it is for those of us constantly online to see the trailers, spots, and posters, they're meant for the average audience to remember that a movie is coming out and entice them to come see it. These days, the posters are a lot more about a single image that represents a key selling point and can work whether you see it on a billboard or on your phone as you're scrolling through social media. This does tend to mean that posters have become a lot more one note these days, and that's unfortunate. I miss the days of old where a lot of details get put into a well-crafted poster and it makes for a stunning piece of art. There are still some films that do things like this, but they're becoming a rare breed now. Today, we'll look at what I think the best poster is from each of the 27 James Bond films and rank them against each other. I'll be looking at only official posters and images that I can find. I wish I could do a more comprehensive list, but there are far too many to cover in a reasonable amount of time, and there always seems to have been some I've missed, so I hope you can accept this compromise. However, I'll do my level best to pick from both the well-known and the obscure, just to provide some variety, and I'll be ranking the posters independently of my thoughts of their respective films, which means there will be at least one surprise high placement if you know my film preferences. I'll also throw in a mention for my least favorite official poster when we get to that film. Let's have some fun celebrating the art of James Bond. License to Kill had a very underwhelming campaign thrown together in the summer of 1989. I know the low box office intake had more to do with the overcrowded summer of releases, but the lackluster promo material couldn't have helped. This is the first Bond film I'm aware of that relies primarily on still photos for the majority of the artwork, and it just feels rushed, and that's because it was. The original artist was Bob Peak, whose work you'll see a little later. But when the title was changed from License Revoked to License to Kill, his concepts were scrapped and they had to come up with something else, which quite frankly sucks. However, I'm curious as to why they couldn't have just kept the original material and switched out the title. Given what I've seen of the concept art, I feel like the change in title shouldn't have impacted the art as much as it did. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure Keith Hampshire and Douglas Kirkland put some real thought into this, but when you have a film as exciting and different from the rest of the series as License, why on earth would you think a fiery image of Robert Davi and a couple of still action images of Bond and the girls would suffice? We need something bold and dynamic, and trust me, I've seen fan art more befitting of the film than this. Like this popular example. While simple, it's far more appealing to look at and has more flair. For all the praise I give this film, this is one area of criticism where I must concede defeat. The Daniel Craig era had a real problem coming up with great posters, and I blame this entirely on the current mindset of marketers these days. Simple images can work, but they can't feel lazy, and most of the Craig posters feel lazy to me. I gave the posters for Quantum of Solace a pass at the time, but with time and tide, I've grown to be a bit blasé about these offerings. Of the two major images, I prefer the one with Bond and Camille in the desert with the burning Perla de las Dunas in the back, partly because there's more color to it, but also I like highlighting Camille. In a way, Quantum is as much her stories as it is Bond's, and since they are mirrors for each other within the plot, having them both look like they could lead the film is a fine way to telegraph that to the audience. However, I feel like there's more you could have done with this campaign if you used this as the central image and then filled out the background with a few more details. Despite the refined art style by Dan Guzzi, I never felt a View to a Kill's poster work was anything but minimal, safe, and bland. In reality, the art style itself is about all the posters have going for them. Posters with mostly landscapes do nothing for me, as while I love looking at city skylines, unless the artist has an interesting and unique way to present the city, I'd rather just look at still photos. This campaign is marked with a terrific looking image of Bond and Mayday against each other, but that one element feels a bit basic to sell this film on. Of all the posters, my favorite is the US 1 sheet with Bond and Stacy on the Golden Gate Bridge, but there's so little beyond that in comparison with like the other films that Dan Guzzi did. There's no Mayday here, there's no explosions, or really anything to spice up the picture. The art of the skyline of San Francisco is nice, and I love the shades of blue sandwiching it, but that's about it. Much of Die Another Day's poster work feels too much like a product of the early 2000s. My issue is that most of the posters feel like they're showing off what the computers could do, so the style and technology takes precedence over being artistically pleasing or presenting us with cool details. It just seems too busy and cluttered. But I have to pick one from this campaign, so I'm going with Pierce and Hallie in the deep blue. There's not a whole lot to distract me from the central focus of the image, which I'm counting as a positive. It's also not the most dynamic of images, but it does call back to an aspect of The Spy Who Loved Me's artwork, which I'll get to later. Not great, but for my money, it's the best of the lot. Casino Royale from 1967's marketing seems a little at odds with the tone of the film to me. Yes, the images on the girl's back suggest craziness, but I find little about the campaign to make it clear that this was a spoof of the Bond films. My favorite poster is this Japanese one, which features images of the film's stars in certain scenes. Even still, doesn't this look pretty close to how the contemporary Connery films would have been marketed? Maybe this isn't the marketing people's fault, as you'd be surprised what key information about a film they may not get told. And to be fair, Casino Royale 67 is a hard film to properly market because it's a hodgepodge of chaos that sometimes stands as a lampoon and satire of the films, and sometimes a barefaced parody. None of the posters really stood out to me, but I have to pick one, so it's this one. Skyfall's promotional material centered on the 50th anniversary of the series and the sense of patriotism. I think that works okay for 2012, but it does mean that when you're divorced from the context of that year, the images are a little too generic and could have been used for just about any Bond film. However, that's not to say I hate using the gun barrel as the starting point, and I think Craig's Bond coming out of a silver gun barrel is probably the best of all these images. It works as an announcement that Bond is coming back, more confident than ever, and that this will be a celebration of all that makes Bond a great franchise. One nitpick though. 50th anniversaries are characterized with gold, not silver. Wouldn't it have been great to use gold as the dominant color? Especially since it would harken back to the film and era that many see as the pinnacle of this series. As a bonus, I said I would throw out my least favorite poster of them all, and unfortunately it comes from the Skyfall collection. Who's the brainiac who thought a mostly white poster with Bond laying down on the ground mid-action was a good idea? This is so generic and mundane of an image that I have a secret hope the person responsible for approving this is being held up at the other end of the gun, promising to never phone in the design for an official Bond poster like this again. Back to the brooding Craig again. The Spectre posters contain some of the biggest culprits of being snooze fests that I think most of the Craig images are. So much so that I'm going to go with the bullet hole teaser poster as my favorite. I feel by this point I've seen a lot of images of Craig just brooding in a nice suit with an image in the background. If the image is great and the composition is solid, I'd love to give it a pass. But most of these feel like the marketers spent less than 10 minutes in a meeting coming up with their idea, and most of the time was spent catching up with each other. I can't tell you how my imagination started to run away with itself when I saw this teaser poster the first time. The bullet hole forming the octopus is a dark image, suggesting the danger we've been missing from some of the Craig posters. And if you're a longtime fan of the series, you probably thought a lot like I did that the bullet hole was going to be a nod to Tracy. Sadly, this wasn't to be, but this is one image I really like, even apart from its film. The second of 4 posters on this list featuring art by Robert McGinnis, Diamonds Are Forever is my least favorite of the official films he did. I do love how the diamond satellite helps with the framing of the images, and I love Bond being surrounded by the 2 women, one of whom is holding the jewels in a seemingly deliberate place. It's a little unfortunate that this poster still markets the action as a major part of the movie, given that Diamonds is one of the least action-driven entries, and also doesn't have too many great set pieces. But it's all focused on the return of Connery to the role of Bond, though I wonder if placing him between a pincer arm means anything, considering Connery's attitude towards the role. It's one of the least striking posters to my mind, but it gets the job done. For the first Bond film, the artist decided to emphasize 3 elements: sex, style, and danger. Dr. No may seem like a simple poster by today's standards, but these elements are exactly what I think makes for the perfect cocktail to entice people to check out Bond. So much like the film itself, it's a great template for everything else to come after. Bond is who every man wishes he were, and who every woman dreams of attracting. The art here is by David Chasman, and it's an attention-grabbing piece. It's entirely illustrated and makes a very calculated choice on coloring, but its roughness suggests a comic book-style escapist fantasy, which is to a T what classic Sean Connery Bond films would be known for. I also love the images depicted at the bottom, representing most of the film's best features, though I wish Jack Lord's Felix Leiter made an appearance here. By the way, this poster features one of the earliest iterations I can find of the 007 logo. The logo was designed by Joseph Karoff, who also designed the iconic poster for West Side Story. Given how important the 007 logo became in the marketing of the franchise, I felt his contribution was worth at least a mention here. Thunderball had perhaps the easiest ride to box office success of all the films, and the marketing teams knew they didn't need to change the formula to get people's interest. Instead, they went with proclaiming the film to be the biggest yet, both with images and words. There's more women, more action, and more style than any previous entry, so the posters became more bombastic. I love a lot of the posters designed by Frank McCarthy and Robert McGinnis, but it's this Japanese variation that catches my eye the most. Every time I look at it, I feel like I'm catching a new detail, and it does a great job advertising the film as a roller coaster of excitement. It's ironic because I find Thunderball to be one of the slower and less action-heavy films of the series, but they aren't showing people anything that isn't in the film, so I gotta give them that. It's such a snazzy piece that I'd absolutely love to hang on my wall. Poor Majesties. After the previous films were sold on the back of Sean Connery is James Bond, George Lazenby's presence seems downplayed. Yeah, he's on the posters, but have you ever noticed that it doesn't say starring George Lazenby as James Bond 007? Also, the early concept for the film had Bond's face in silhouette, almost as if the filmmakers were embarrassed by the new fella. I know this was a result of Lazenby deciding he was one and done before a lot of the imaging was done, but still. Of all the posters I've seen, I prefer this Japanese variation, as Lazenby is the biggest and most prominent image, as he should be. It also features still photos of some of the action scenes and still has the requisite sexual element with Ruby's naked back. It suggests to me that even though a new guy is wearing the shoulder holster, everything I love about the series is back and I'm in for a great time. If I saw this poster on the side of a theater, I'd clear my evening. Goldfinger's artwork is unique amongst the series. Why? Because I've not found another instance where the man in charge of the film's titles also worked on the poster art. It often features the Golden Girl with projections, and while I'd love to include a variation of that, my favorite is the French one-sheet with illustrated images, such as Bond facing off against Oddjob and the Aston driving away from Fort Knox. It's far more dynamic and helps to generate excitement about the content of the film. When I see this, I know I'm in for a fun adventure. My main issue with the regular Goldfinger images is that they seem to be saying, it's Connery back as Bond, what more do you need? Sure, that's effective for a lot of folks, but given that Connery has never been my favorite actor in the role, and I'm of the camp that feels the character should draw more attention than the man playing him, it does mean most of them do little to excite me about the movie. Here, the illustrations look great, they still retain the Golden Girl for the main posters, and I love the reuse of the Connery image from Dr. No, only with the gun turned in a different direction. This is not the most iconic of the Goldfinger images, but it's the one I'm the most fond of. This heart is cold. The most era-appropriate of all the posters, The Spy Who Loved Me's main image feels like it could have only come out of the late 70s. It does make it feel a little less timeless than the others, but it's still packed with great images. Atlantis Rising, the Lotus submarine, the Egyptian elements at the top, and of course the Leparis interior. I only wish they found a way to incorporate the Union Jack here, if only to represent the pre-titles. The main thing that struck me here was putting Bond and Anya together like they were dual protagonists of the story. I mean, they aren't, but since a lot of people make a big deal about Anya being one of the first women portrayed as Bond's equal, I suppose this image reflects how that became a key selling point of this particular adventure. And you have to remember, this film came out right after the second wave of feminism movement. So placing Anya as Bond's equal was probably going for more than just artistically pleasing symmetry. A fine job by Bob Peak. A recurring trend with the Connery film's marketing was that he was as much the selling point as the character. This kind of rubs salt in the wound a bit when we switch over to other actors, and I know a lot of fans feel the Craig films, particularly No Time to Die, was more a celebration of the actor than the character. Still, one has to admire the boldness and audacity of You Only Live Twice's campaign to proclaim Sean Connery is James Bond. And he's the one actor I've seen where I think most fans would be fine with having that unique accolade on an actual poster. Of all the illustrated images, my favorite is the one depicting the final battle inside the volcano layer done by Frank McCarthy. There's so much going on here I have to stop and look at almost every square inch of the image. Yeah, having Connery tilted to the side is a bit strange, but I suppose they wanted to emphasize the larger-than-life quality of the hero. He defies all rules of logic, and he's so entertaining it's hard to care a jolt when he does. Now, I don't want people thinking I have anything against simplicity in posters. I don't. And the fact that I have Casino Royale's US one sheet this high should confirm that. Bond looking stylish as ever, with Eva Green in the back, makes it clear this will be a different type of Bond film, and I'm here for it. The sleek use of black and white with the cooler blues makes this look reminiscent of classic films apart from Bond. Given the outlandishness of almost everything about the Die Another Day marketing, this was a breath of fresh air, trying to appeal to non-Bond fans as well as the stalwarts, though I never could have predicted at the time this would have become the template for all the Craig films to follow. I have one issue with the poster: Craig's face. Something looks off about it. I think it's the strong light that seems to clash with the rest of the light sources on the poster. I get that you want to highlight the new Bond and don't want to repeat what Majesties did with Lazenby, but this feels too bright and harsh to match with the rest of the image. Maybe it's just me, but it's really distracting. After doing a suitable job with diamonds, Robert McGinnis returns to give us an iconic image of Roger Moore as 007 for Live and Let Die, one that would be reused until Moonraker. The idea of using the playing cards is great, and it reminds me of the door panel style of posters, where you have a character per image and you align them going down the hall. I love the choice of images as well, and the danger elements are on display in spades with this one. Appropriate given the card angle, but also because Live and Let Die is one of the best examples of the series of Bond being the stranger in a strange land full of espionage. He doesn't know who was all on his side, which adds a sense of mystery to this poster. It's a bit disappointing not to see more of the villains on the poster besides Baron Samedi. But given that this was the early 70s, and the marketing team may have felt uncomfortable with images of Bond going against black people, I can live with that. One final observation. I don't remember ever seeing Roger behind a mounted gun in the film, but I guess you gotta get an explosion in there somewhere. We haven't learned our lesson from the Craig films yet, have we? Man, No Time to Die's campaign would probably be my least favorite, except for all the other Craig efforts. However, there is one saving grace in this collection, and it's the character-heavy version with the images forming Bond's body. Now this is more like it. It makes the film look fun and action-packed with a sense of finality, which represents the movie perfectly. Having the 007 logo in the shade of blue of the Cuban walls is a nice touch, and it doesn't give too much away about the movie. It also brings back fond memories of the great composition of earlier Bond posters, and looks like someone not only put in some effort here, but may have had a blast putting it together. A big step up from the other posters of this tenure. Borrowing his previous concept from Live and Let Die, Robert McGinnis gives us a new spin for the man with the golden gun, and it screams fun. It's flashy, it's colorful, and it has all the elements you want from a Bond film. Exotic locations, beautiful women, great action and stunts, and danger galore. My favorite bit is with the golden gun being loaded with the engraved 007 bullet. What a great way to suggest this duel between the titans. I think this is also my favorite mixture of colors from McGinnis, and every image feels like a great choice to include. Don't know why Maud Adams and Britt Eklund seem to be dancing or have their arms out like that, unless they're supposed to be lines drawing our eyes to the central man of the poster, and in which case I think that's fine. Can't say that there's much wrong with this, I just like the next ones more. The World Is Not Enough had a few ideas for its posters, such as the world laid out almost like a radar or dial underneath Bond, or the Bond in action picture that was used for the video game box art. As cool as those all are, this is a case where I'm going with the simplest poster. Why? Because tell me you don't remember this bit of art. The flaming girl is so striking, I completely missed Bond's silhouette in black next to her for longer than I care to admit. The simple beauty of this image is so good, I can't help but be put in the Bond mood. Sure, it doesn't tell us anything about the film, but much like a later film on this list, sometimes a good inventive image is all you need to sell the movie. It's the one poster that you could separate from its film and use to represent the series as a whole, and I'd have no complaints. It's that good. After impressing the world with their marketing for the previous film, Randy Braun joins Mark Belen to create the artwork for Tomorrow Never Dies. It is lesser to my mind, but still striking. The US 1 sheet in red is my favorite. Red is an eye-popping color, and if you know your color theory, there's a lot that can be read into that choice. It represents both danger and passion in several parts of the world, which feels appropriate for a Bond poster. It's deceptive in its composition. You can just look at Bond with the women, or you can look beyond them to see the TV screens and see how they're putting in more information about the film without making the poster look too busy. There's a wonderful symmetry about the whole thing. Using mirroring TV screens to depict Carver as well as including your main Bond women on the sides of him, The center feels like it's drawing a letter X, putting our attention towards Pierce, which is a great way to make this an aesthetically pleasing poster. Plus, I love introducing the new Walther P99 after decades of the reliable PPK, a fabulous follow-up to GoldenEye's artwork. Bond number 2, New Dr. No had people intrigued to see more of the characters, so the key elements from those posters had to return. Except From Russia with Love features more color, is less busy, and has my favorite image of Connery to boot. The firmness with which he holds the gun, his devilish smile, and the raised eyebrow invites you to come back for more of what we loved. Only this time, it'll be more exotic and dangerous. A good Bond poster makes you want to rewatch the movie, and I always want to go back to this one after seeing the poster. Renato Frattini and Eric Polford should be honored by the fact that their image was deemed so timeless it was reused for the box art for the video game 40 years later. That's longevity for you. The Legs campaign for For Your Eyes Only by Bill Gold is one of the most iconic of the series. It's so good, it was used on virtually all the major posters and variants of the film. This fuller quad version has to be my pick. It ticks off all the right boxes for me, showing the major action pieces of the film minus the climax, and even features Eric Kriegler and the Return of the Lotus. But really, it's the image of the legs with the crossbow and Bond in the center that makes this campaign stand out. It's a very simple and elegant way to capture the essence of James Bond, much like the flaming girl from The World Is Not Enough, and I love it. The only thing I don't like about this quad version is Bond's face. I wish it was the more alert face that we see in the still photo version of Moore on the US 1 sheet. Oh well. As a side note, I do find it funny that some of the VHS and DVD covers seek to replicate the image, though with the reverse. It's Melina standing between Bond's legs, though I'm sorry to say Roger doesn't get the same artistic flair that Melina did in the original posters. The public's excitement for Never Say Never Again was based solely on one element, the return of Sean Connery. This naturally meant the marketing team knew they had at least one image they had to focus on, but I'm sorry, I don't like the primary image of Connery they used. Mostly because the posters feel like they're going for a classic Bond adventure kind of feel, but Connery smiling like that seems silly. It's like an old mentor doing a knowing wink and a smile, a twinkle that clashes with the more contemporary and dangerous elements of the posters. Contrast this with the images of Connery used 20 years before, and it feels out of place. Thankfully, I know of a tie poster that helps to make my argument, and it's one of my favorites in the Bond series. If you had a choice of seeing a film with this kind of poster versus one with this, which one would you rather see? The tie poster feels far more evocative of classic Bond artwork and has an appropriate image of Connery, much like the Robert McGuinness artwork for the original film, featuring lots of the requisite elements that make you excited to see a Bond film. Seeing this almost makes me forget how much I don't care for this film and makes me want to give it another watch. Without this poster, Never Say Never Again would be towards the lower end of one of my lists once again. See, movie, you've got good things about yourself. Flaunt them. Dan Guzzi once again comes up with a striking image that I adore, Bond wrapped around by the multiple arms of Octopussy. In fact, I can't think of the film without thinking of this image, and it's a wonderful way to address the title within the poster. This image was the main one used on all the advertising, and my favorite use of this is the tie variant. The poster matches the grandiose style of the film, lots of action with an alluring woman who may or may not be on Bond's side. There are so many details here that I feel like I still haven't given it the proper attention it demands. Thus, the imagery is as alluring to me as the leading lady herself, making the poster doubly impactful. It's like a puzzle game. Can you recognize every image from the film? It's almost certainly my favorite poster from the series that isn't recognized much with other fans, and that's bordering on a crime to me. I imagine Dan Guzzi is one of the artists most liked by other Bond fans, and I certainly admire him for what he brought to Moonraker. Now, you're probably expecting Bond and Holly on the space station to be my pick for the best poster, but I'm going to go with a slight variation here. I've chosen the US 1 sheet because it still retains the major image I love from the Fuller poster, which is Bond in the spacesuit and Holly to the side, and throws in more representation from the film. Jaws being menacing is still here, just on the cable car in Rio holding Bond high above the city. You also have some of the action in Venice and the Amazon, and you're still able to have the exterior of space behind the characters with some space shuttles. This was probably the toughest call to make on this list, as I also love the other version, and if I were doing a list where I allowed more than one entry per film, I'd include them both. I feel the US 1 sheet slightly better represents the whole movie, which is why I picked it, though I do miss Drax pointing defiantly at Bond. After a very lackluster response to License to Kill, the first Bond film of the 90s had a lot riding on it. Now with more modern technology at their disposal, the collage of still images had about as much potential for dynamism as the illustrated posters would, and GoldenEye took advantage of the technology. My goodness, this is beautiful stuff, and I've never once thought any part of it was lacking in imagination. The use of colors, the composition of 3 leads on the top with the action in the middle, and the great new version of the 007 logo in red, I adore this image. Others must have as well, because this was also the artwork used for the video game, and it's still the banner you see when you pull it up on Xbox to play. Earl Klasky and Randy Braun deserve the highest of honors for this effort. Also, let's address that meme about the image. Yeah, it's initially funny to look at, but I could always look past it, and it is slightly aggravating to me in a comical way how one observation destroys this image for some. It was definitely intentional to place this hand where it is, and I adore how strong the image is. Pierce is looking down the sights without closing an eye. In my opinion, we have not yet come close to matching the genius of this artwork. In contrast to Honor Majesty's Secret Service, which sought to downplay the new Bond, The Living Daylights announces it loud and proud. As much as I love the teaser poster of Bond and Kara that's reminiscent of the For Your Eyes Only artwork, there's no contest as to which is the better poster. It's the main British canvas by Brian Bysouth. Using the gun barrel and Timothy's image as the central points, this art swoops around with a crisp, colorful collage of images, and it's like a kaleidoscope of awesome beauty. It's a pleasing set of images that represents the major highlights and cast members from the film. I especially love Kara's pose with the sniper, and I feel like one look at this image gives me the same kind of thrills I get from watching the film. This is the pinnacle of illustrated and photographed Bond artwork to me, and I long for the days when marketing people might once again put this kind of effort in to sell a movie. When considering what topic to do next for a ranking video, I'm usually more intrigued if it's a category that hasn't been extensively covered by other creators. There have been some other videos on the topic of ranking the posters, but they're usually limited to just 5 or 10 entries. I like to see every film represented on a list if I can, hence deciding to take my favorites from each and pit them against each other. In researching for this video, I found a lot more background information on the artists and what other films they had done that I would have liked to have had included, but I couldn't figure out a way to do that without it becoming an unnatural highlight of the artists over a ranking. So permit me in the credits to include the most accurate attributions to each of the main ranked images that I could find. The James Bond posters are a great place to go when you want to see some of the best talent in the film business, and many people have had a hand in promoting the series. I couldn't possibly thank all of them, so let's raise a collective glass to them. Hopefully you've got at least one Bond poster displayed somewhere on your walls, and it can be a great way to get a small injection of 007 into your daily life without revisiting the films constantly. However, I may spend an unhealthy amount of time admiring the artwork whenever I see it, so it might just be shorter to watch the respective film anyways.
There are very few people who haven't heard of Bond. British Secret Service, 007, License to Kill. He's good, even by my standards.